And now my favorite part, and that's lighting. So let's do some. With each episode, I want to present you with the different setup of lighting that I use. And in the first episode, it was just a single sunlight with really sharp shadows that almost looks like a vector drone. And this time I will use sunlight as well, but just as a fill light. And we will additionally use some area lights to create some visual interest in the scene. And as I pointed before, the difference between sunlight and area light is that sunlight simulates the real sun behavior in a matter that within the bounds of the scene, it doesn't really matter how far it's from the object. Only the size, the intensity and the direction of the light matters when it comes to sunlight. As opposed to that, area lights has intensity in watts. It simulates the real light source within the scene, and it has a fall off. So based on the intensity of the light, it doesn't travel forever, but after a while the intensity goes down and later it disappears the further you get from the source of the light. This applies to point lights too, the area lights and every other source. Only sunlight is constant. So let's add some sunlight. Press Shift A, go to the light and click sun. Now we can grab it up a little bit. Not that it matters, because we could leave it right here and just adjust the rotation and everything would look fine. But I really like to have that perspective that the sun is shining from the top and I can see the direction on the gizmo. So let's grab it up, G then Z. Let's see how high it is. 8 is fine, I think. And right now you can switch to the cursor pivot point right here, as you already know how to do. So switch to the 3D cursor, and here we can use the double R rotation as well. So if you press R and R again, you can rotate the light however you want, and it can be really free and creative process. Or if you're not sure, you can always set some numerical values. So maybe let's do that. Let's rotate this along the x-axis. So press R, then X, and 45. And then you can rotate on the z-axis. So press R, then Z to rotate around the z-axis, and 45, and press minus. So we want to go into the other direction. Press enter. And I want to have sunlight going from this direction. And we can check the shadows that it creates. And if you go to this little arrow with the light settings, now that we have a light in the scene, we can actually enable this. And we can enable the scene world. So we turn off the HDRI lighting. And right now you can see only the light source that we added to the scene. Now, since this is a little bit dark, I want to give the light a little bit more intensity. So click here on the object data and notice how the icon changed to the light, because it's a light type object. And adjust the strength to something like 3, so we can better see the shadows that it creates. And right here you can check again how the light changes when you rotate the sun. So let's press double R and you can rotate around and search for some lighting that you think would look cool on this kind of scene. When you go from this side, you can see the scene becomes really flat and a little bit boring in my opinion. But if you go from the side, you create these nice shadows and nice highlights, and the scene really pops out more and it looks more 3D. Let's press Shift A and add the area light. Grab it up a little bit, so press G, then Z, grab it all the way up. And now we can rotate it along the X-axis to give it a really shallow angle. So press R, then X, and rotate it down. On the right side you can see the actual angles that you're rotating. So I want to go to something like -60 degrees, and then press R and Z to rotate along the Z-axis. And let's input the 45 degrees, so I want to have it opposite to the camera. And let's set it up a little bit. I want to give it this strong orange, almost red color, and really ramp up the power. So let's go to something like 2000. And immediately you see that this is a completely different result right away. By just adding one light, you created completely different illustration. Now, when it comes to these shadows, I really like how the stripes of light are created. And you can adjust the shadows by playing with the size of the light, but you won't see it here because this is the LookDev mode and Eevee isn't set up properly. Let's switch to cycles right now. Go to the render tab here, and here where you can see render engine, you can select cycles, and you should know that from the episode 1. And let's switch to GPU from the CPU. There might be a case where the GPU compute option won't do any difference in the speed of the preview for you, and this might be for several reasons, but one of them is that the GPU should be enabled in the settings as well, and I will show you how right now. Just go into the edit, preferences, and right here under system you will find different cycles render devices. And for me this is CUDA because I have a NVIDIA graphics card, so you might have something different here, but you need to search for a viable option in these settings here to really enable the GPU. And I had to check this GeForce GTX option to GPU to start work properly, so keep that in mind if something doesn't work for you. And right now we can enable the render preview, but first I want to finish the scene by giving it a background. So let's press Shift A and add a plane, and we'll just scale it up. So press S and scale it up to fill the whole area of the camera view. And one additional thing, I want to give it a material. So go to the material tab, create a new material, and let's call it background or BG. And right now I don't want to do anything with the color, but actually switching from no material to principled PSDF does matter, because then there are several things that are computed, like the roughness and all that stuff you wouldn't have when you don't have the material applied to an object. So that's why I applied the default material. So let's enable the render preview, and you can do it right here with this icon, or again holding Z and go up, release, and you have the rendered preview. Now there is one little trick you can use to make this go faster, and that's to limit the render to only selected area, and it's done by pressing Ctrl B and dragging a selection around the camera. And now the cycles renders only this preview, and this can be used to really preview only partial images. So if you press the Ctrl B again and select only part of the scene, you can see the preview there, and you don't have to render all the things around. So really useful. And I will scroll out a little bit or zoom out a little bit because I don't want the GPU to slow down my recording. And I want to play with the lights some more. So let's select the sunlight. You can do it from the outline view as well. And right here, click nodes. And let's adjust that strength to 3. And let's give it a little bit yellowish color. Yeah, something like this. Now we can play with the distance of this light. And here, when you start to adjusting the size, you will really see how it affects the shadow. So if you increase the size of this area light, you can see there are really soft shadows and gradients. Now let's make it really small. You can see right away there are some sharp shadows going on. Yeah, I like to keep that somewhere around 1 for these primary lights, because I like these shadows and these light streaks. And there's one last part, and there are a few last things I want to do. I want to adjust the angle on the sunlight, because now that we see the shadows, I don't want these sharp shadows here. I wanted to use the sun as a fill light, so let's just drag this up a little bit, and you can see, if you really push it more, that the shadows become softer and softer, and you can go all the way to something like 40 degrees to really make it only a fill light. Okay, and the last part of the lighting is adding some ambient light. And what I mean by that is this thing you can see in the world settings here on the right. Click the tab and you will see there is a surface option and there's a color, and you can actually adjust the color of the world around your scene and it'll affect your lighting. So right now we have this gray color, and if you move all the way here to the blue and really bring this up on the value, you can see there is a nice blue fill light to the shadows, and the scene also became much brighter. So yeah, we can tone it down a little bit, like this maybe. And I really like to use this ambience, and it doesn't matter if I have a really strong light here, because that additional ambience, and especially if you have a orange lighting and you give that complementary blue color to it, it really makes a huge difference in the final styling. So this is kind of something like a little bit of my secret sauce. So yeah, you can use that. You can experiment with different colors of the world. You can go maybe something violet or something red, green, orange, whatever you like. Play with it and find your style. Most of the time I go for some blue tones on the background, and then I like to light my scenes with the strong orange or red lighting or something like that, and it really makes the difference. And it's the thing that most of you guys and the guys on the YouTube tutorials and everywhere on the social networks were asking, that how I do my lighting. And there are many things, but this is really a strong part of that process. And now if you want, you can switch back to the look dev mode. So click here or hold Z and switch to look dev, and you can right away see that the scene looks better here too. And I don't like how the water has not so many reflections, so I want to adjust the angle on that area light. So select area light here in the outliner, press R to rotate, then X, and then X again to go local. you can see how the axis changed, and now you can adjust the angle of the light and how the shadows behave. And I want to go somewhere here to see more of these reflections here. And you can also maybe change the position of the light. So if we press G and then double X, we can move it along the same axis, not rotate. And if we go a little bit to the right, it creates additional reflections here and this nice enlightened part. So I really like this. And now if we have the isometric view in place, the lights in place, I always see some things that I want to change. So I want to show you some final touches on this scene. And for example, I think this is a little bit empty here, and the size of the trees doesn't match the scene. And again, this is visible only because we switched from the perspective to the isometric projections, and sometimes it's a good idea to have camera in place even while you're modeling, so you can check your final composition. If so, yeah, let's switch back here to the median point and let's play with some sizing, some rotation, maybe position of some objects like this, rocks there, the size of the rocks, whatever you like to make the scene look better. Maybe this can be larger a little bit. We can move this. Yeah, just make sure you really like the scene at the end. And I already like this much more. I think the trees were too small. And we can maybe shift select the road with the lines and move it along the X here a little bit. And it'll create this nice part. So yeah, a little bit of adjustments, the lighting settings, and we're almost ready.